This is my fault. My hubby put my affair in hospital. It's been 3 months now and he's still in there. I have to admit, things have gotten pretty complicated because of my actions. You know, sometimes we do things thinking it would just be a harmless and innocent fun, not knowing that the fun we had would become our worst nightmare. I didn't know it would turn out like how it had turned. I didn't even get a warning, but either way, it became my worst nightmare. I'll be using fake name to protect the privacy of the involved parties. My name is Gina Carson, female 29, and my husband is Jace Jordan, male 29. We both met at Howard University a few years back. That time I was still a freshman at Howard University, mind you. I came from a low-class standard of living environment. I'd gotten a scholarship to do business administration and management. I loved learning about businesses because I had a dream of becoming an owner of a big investment company. By the grace of God, my dream almost came true. Jace was a handsome guy. He had the brains, which made him more handsome. He was what girls call an IT guy. So we became friends after like a week of spending time with each other, and he would sometimes help me with my studies. I appreciated his brains a lot, but he was somehow a distraction. Our friendship went on for 6 months. During summer holidays. That time I was going to go home to Fredericksburg, Virginia. To tell the truth, I didn't want to go home. Home was depressing. My parents were going through a divorce, so there was really nothing serious about going home. I missed Jace a lot, even though we would communicate most of the time. He lived an hour and some minutes away from where I was staying, so you would think how bored I was because I couldn't even make a plan to meet up with him at least. Was I already falling for the guy? I loved him, I know. The fact that I got jealous whenever he would go AWOL would make me very angry. But I didn't think he was actually feeling the same way because he was not saying anything, but I would notice his actions. It made me happy whenever he would spend time with me. I loved being around him. I was so taken, but I couldn't confess my feelings to him because I was scared of rejection, and I would always get thoughts of him telling me that he had a girlfriend back at home. Time passed. My relationship with Jace was great, and it was like we were made for each other, you know. Another thing, I had become friends with the 2 girls I was living with. They were not as bad as I had thought. It was just that they loved going out whenever they had time. They made sure to enjoy their young life. They were forward but cool. So one day they had invited me to go with them to one of the clubs not far from our place. I was a bit skeptical at first, but I eventually went with them. Mind you, I had never drank any alcohol or been to clubs before, so it was my first time and I enjoyed every moment of it. We had so much fun. We drank from cocktails to shots until we were out of it. I couldn't even speak to Jace that night because I had left my phone back in the student apartment. I knew that he was going to get angry at me for going out without telling him, the worst part of leaving my phone behind. The following day, he came to my place looking livid. I knew that he was angry at the fact that I had to go to a nightclub and didn't tell him. He told me that he didn't want me associating myself with the girls that I live with. I didn't understand why he didn't want me to associate with people that I live with because he was not always with me, and I needed some time outside the apartment to find myself. I mean, why would I coop myself inside the apartment each and every time as if I was sick or I was in my old age? Our relationship had ups and downs like any other relationships. It was going smoothly. We were so much in love with each other. As much as he didn't like me hanging out with my roommates, he didn't have a choice but to accept it because he was not always with me. And I had found out that his father was retiring from their family business, so when the father retires, he would have to step in as an elder son since his siblings were still young to take over the business. We would fight a lot about his time management and the lack of attention, but I knew that love was there. I would be lying if I said Jace loved me less. That guy loved me. He loved me for me, you know. He never judged me or looked down on me because I was coming from a lower class than him. Instead, he would always give me guidance and motivation to work hard so I can live the dream that I had. Time passed, I moved in with Jace. Well, he had negotiated with me that I should move in with him, or move to the apartment he was living in since it was safer. I knew that he didn't want me to move in with him or move to his apartment because of my safety, but it was because he didn't want me to stay any longer with the roommates I was living with. Well, he was kind of jealous that I had formed a friendship with them and they were too much of extroverts. He would tell me that my friends were chaotic and a bad influence to me. I didn't understand his jealousy and insecurities because he was not always with me, you know. I am a girl. I get lonely and bored at times whenever he is not around, so my roommates were a great distraction to me. They always managed to lighten up my mood, since he was in training to be a CEO of his father's business. Our relationship meant a lot to me. I was even ready to give him kids, but all that changed when he also started changing. I was the happiest woman. I got to be with the man of my heart. Guys, you don't know how much I love my husband. Did I count the chickens before they hatched? I knew he loved me. He showed that to me in every way, and he made me the woman amongst others. At least he made me believe he loved me. My relationship with Jace was a roller coaster. One minute we were fine. He was the most loving, caring, and affectionate husband ever. Then the next he was gone, saying he was going on business trips. I would sometimes not understand the sudden business trips that would take him weeks, if not months, to come back. And when I asked about his trips, he would tell me that he wanted to expand his father's business, so in order to do that, he should travel a lot to meet up with some investors. During that year, I'd started a job in an investment company, name withheld due to personal reasons, as a financial accountant. And as expected, Jace was not there to celebrate any of my achievements with me, but my girls were. I remember that time he came back a week after I had started the job. He just came with lousy excuses and roses. The job was a great distraction for me. It helped me to not think a lot about Jace. Yes, we were communicating and seeing each other from time to time, but it was no longer the same. Even our intimate moments were no longer the same, though I appreciated the little time he gave me, but they were not enough. So I resorted to spending time with my girls most of the time, going out, having a few drinks, and socializing. Well, I was not a person who liked socializing, but the more I went out with the girls, I got introduced to the alcohol kind of fun I learned to socialize with strangers. If my husband was present at all times, I wouldn't have time to even go out and socialize with strangers because he would be there with me, you know. As time went on, I got tired of always having to beg Jace to get time and spend time with me. Everyone gets tired, right? As much as I had been patient because I knew and hoped that he loved me, and he would never do something that would jeopardize our relationship, so I held on and trusted. But then sometimes love alone is not enough. That was what I had realized after I had been patient with Jace for a very long time. Our marriage was like I was in this love and relationship thing alone. My heart longed for him, but he was never there. The worst part, I had even moved in with him thinking that maybe since I had moved in, he would make time for me, but things were still the same. Well, not the same, but they got worse. When I told him that I couldn't carry on like how he was treating me anymore, I was tired and fed up. That was the time where he tried to mend our relationship. He started making time for me even though his endless business trips were there, but he tried his best. As much as that was what I had wanted, but I had to take a break from him so he could also get his own time to think things through and think deeply on what he wanted, because his "I love you" were no longer making any difference to me. I had even forgotten about the times he was not giving me his time and not around. I had missed him so much, but what I had missed more on him was our intimate moments. Those were the best and greatest moments of all time. If I were to be asked to go back to that one thing that Jace had provided and make sure to enjoy it like it was my last time, that would be our intimate moments. Every moment of it was always on fire and satisfaction. The girl that I was friends with once called me and told me that she was hosting her birthday party at the club that weekend. So I was like, why not? Jace had gone on a business trip, back at it again. He had told me that he was going to be gone for the whole week. I was used to it, so it was not some kind of an issue or a big deal to me. Well, as much as he was trying to mend all those months we were apart, but it was bound to happen that he went back to his old self, the father's puppet, and it didn't make any difference. So I went to the party, and as expected, it was a blast. It was epic to a point that I didn't even think about Jace. I had forgotten that he even existed. I had so much fun, so there were some guys that were there. Apparently, they had invited themselves into a party, and the girls didn't have any problem, so was I. The more the merrier, right? My husband was not available, so why not spend the night with the strangers because we were having so much fun? Did I commit a crime for doing that? Guys suggested that we went to the nearest hotel to continue with the party. Well, one of them knew the birthday girl, so I didn't have a problem moving the party with them to the hotel. When we got to the hotel, the party continued and we had so much fun. I noticed a familiar face in that hotel, and I think it was one of Jace's friends, even though I was really out of it, but I wouldn't have mistaken that face no matter how intoxicated I was. The party went on till the following day. Everyone was out of it. But something happened that night, and I do not remember it because I was really blackouted. The following morning, I woke up hoping that I would see my friends so we could all go home together. But to my surprise, I woke up with two strangers in bed. The worst part was that these strangers were butt naked. I panicked, thinking I had been molested, but when I touched myself, it showed that nothing was done to me. So I just didn't waste any time. I took whatever I had come with and requested a cab home since we had left our cars at the club and rode in one of the guys' cars. I tried calling the girls, but none of them dared to answer my calls. I needed answers on what had occurred that night, you know. I was so stressed because my mind was blank. I had a very bad hangover, and when I got home, I found Jace back from his business trip. I had thought he would be gone for a week, but I guess whatever he went to do didn't take too much time. 1 week later, I got a friend request on Facebook from a guy named Edward Watkins. I accepted it, and to my surprise, he was one of the guys from the party. He sent me an inbox message, which I read after about a week because I do not regularly read or answer my inbox messages on Facebook. When I looked at the guy's pictures on Facebook, I was taken aback by his handsomeness. I then replied to his text. We started to chat more often until he asked me to go out with him, of which I wasn't sure if it would be appropriate for me to go out with a stranger. Another week passed. The guy had been pestering me about going out with him, which left me no choice but to accept the request, and told him that I would be the one to choose the restaurant that we would meet at. During that week we met, and I would say that the guy was more handsome in person. He was down to earth, yet talkative and funny. He reminded me of Jace when he first approached me and when we were friends. Our personalities and energy clicked, you know. We talked like we had known each other for the longest time. Time passed. Edward and I got close, way too close to a point that some people would say we were dating. I would spend most of my time with him, doing mostly adventurous activities. I was trying to pass time with Edward, you know. I couldn't stay cooped up in the house for the longest time because I didn't even know when my husband would have time for me again. I missed him so much, you know. Even our intimate moments were no longer the same. There was a time when I felt an urge to kiss Edwards whenever we were together, but I would somehow remember that I was a married woman, and I had to respect my marriage. So some of the times my husband Jace would come back home tired, so I would sometimes wear a lingerie to spice up things and bring some action spark into our again, but I would be wasting my time and effort for doing that because he would come back very tired, and he would just take a bath, eat, and just doze off. What infuriated me the most was when he would just doze off during a serious conversation, and always get tired after one round of our intimate moment. It was really a turnoff for me because I wouldn't reach my climax and he would leave me hanging and fall asleep. It was no longer fun in our marriage, and I hated that. Why introduce me to fun stuff and good things then leave me hanging when I become an addict? I was just a weirdo and a shy girl who lived with her parents and had no friends or whatsoever. But I got involved with Jace. He introduced me to a lot of stuff that includes intimacy. He introduced me to it and I got hooked. I loved being intimate and being freaky with him just like how he had taught me, but he wasn't there anymore to satisfy my needs and desires. I didn't want to go outside my marriage and break my wedding vows, but I was driven by desires and greed, I think. So one night Edward had asked me to accompany him somewhere. He didn't disclose the location as he said it was a private location, only to find out that we were going to the party. Well, it was one of his cousin's graduation parties. The party was just epic. That night, Jace had gone to see his mother who wasn't well. I couldn't go with him because I was busy with work also, so he was left alone. So at the party, I drank a lot, trying to forget about my husband that had changed on me and no longer giving me his undivided attention. I got intoxicated and I found myself kissing Edward. His lips were soft and tender. But one thing that threw me off was the way he was kissing me. He didn't have the skills to kiss. The only thing he was chasing was what was in between my legs. But another thing, he knew how to explore a woman's body. He took me from the party to another planet. I felt like I was floating in clouds. That's how much I was enjoying the way he was exploring my body. I loved every moment of it. Besides the kissing skills, the guy had great body exploration skills and good intimate drive. He made me reach my climax within a few minutes, and I don't know how many times I had climaxed. That's how good it was. I know it was wrong of me, but I couldn't help it. Jace was no longer doing it the way he was doing it before. He was very calm, but when he got angry, even the house would be on fire. So I would always try by all means to keep the peace between us. I no longer complained about his business trips and his absence in my life and in our marriage. On the other hand, Edward was making me feel completely happy. Spending time with Edward made me feel at ease. I felt a sense of belonging, and he understood me and my needs. I know I shouldn't have fallen for a person I called a friend, but I couldn't help it. Edward had once confessed his love for me before, but I was so much in love with Jace, so I kept rejecting him and told him that I didn't see him in that manner. He used to fulfill my desires and give me everything I needed from a man. He supported, and most of all, he understood. I couldn't get him off my head. We chatted every day, and I was actually falling harder for the guy. The attention he would give me was on top of the world. He would always ask if I was still okay. He was really fussy over me in a charming way, though, and I loved the attention he gave me. Was I falling for Edward? The sex with Jace was okay, but mostly he was a 2 times a week or once a month vanilla kind of guy. but he indulged me when I wanted to do some more adventurous things and was generally attentive to what I needed. He rarely initiated, though, which was a bummer for me. My husband was really boring to a point that I had even forgotten how my husband's lips tasted like. I really missed our moments when we were still getting to know each other. Edward and I eventually formed an affair. I didn't know if it was a love affair or a sexual one, but I was feeling some love for the guy. Our love was the most precious thing that had ever happened to me. We had no problems, you know. I know what I was doing was wrong, and it was wrong of me to drag Jace like that while I knew that I was in love with another man. But the problem was that I also loved Jace, so I was stuck in between two men. We were so perfect for each other. Edward was like my pill that I was supposed to take every day, but guess what? I defaulted, and my pill was no longer a use to me because of my carelessness and selfishness. Well, my husband and I had been trying for a child before he went absent and was too busy for his wife. I don't know if I would say it was luck or a curse because something bad unexpectedly happened, and there was no way to change everything. About 2 months later, I found out that I was pregnant. I didn't know if I would be happy or be sad because another thing, I didn't even know if the baby was my husband's or it was Edward's. A lot was just going on and it was freaking me out. I once had a thought to terminate the pregnancy, but then again, I thought that I had always wanted a child, and there may be possibilities that it might be my husband's. Well, that was what I had hoped for. The night when I found out about my pregnancy, I decided to cook my husband's favorites. I waited for him to come home, well after I had texted him to avail himself earlier. I didn't even bother myself by wearing any sexy thing because I knew that he was not even going to be fazed by it. When he got back, we had a light conversation. Well, more like he was the one talking about work and other stuff. Meanwhile, my palm was sweating. I didn't know if I should tell him or let him see for himself when my tummy grows. I eventually dropped the bombshell and told him. The reaction he gave me was what I was hoping for. He was so ecstatic and shocked, to say the least. My heart was beating so fast because I didn't even know whose child I was carrying exactly. That time I knew that I had to break things off with Edward because I was pregnant and hoped that it was my husband's. I knew that my skeletons would someday get out of the closet, and that was the scariest asterisk teat of my life. I knew that if Jace was to find out what I had been doing behind his back and in our marriage, he would lose and maybe do the worst. The pregnancy journey was good and sweet because I had support from my husband, Jace. He was with me throughout the whole pregnancy journey. I was so full and happy. I mean, what else I would have asked for if I had everything like I did? I was happier that my husband was back to me. I was getting his attention again. I felt loved and secured, though I had my times of feeling guilty about what I did to my marriage and behind my husband's back. The guilt would eat me up more, especially when he would play with my tummy or when we were making love. My life was perfect. My husband was supportive, loving, caring. The worst part, he would even sacrifice his business trips for me to have a smooth pregnancy journey. So at 7 months, I started having some abdominal cramps. At that time, I was alone in the house. Jace was at work, and that day he was going to have a very important meeting with a big client, so I didn't want to bother him. I didn't know who to call, so I found myself calling Edward. I know I shouldn't have done that, but he was the only available and close person I had contacts with. I felt my water breaking, and that was the last straw of everything. I was in pain for almost 4 hours when the ambulance arrived. Luckily, it arrived at the same time as my Edward, which was what I was grateful for. So I sent a text message and a voicemail message to my husband telling him what was happening since he was not answering his phone. And it did hurt me that he was not answering my emergency calls, because I know very well that even presidential meetings do not last for 2 or 3 hours, but my husband was in a meeting for 4 hours. When we got to the hospital, I was rushed to an intensive emergency care unit since it was still early to give birth. To say what happened next, I would be lying because I do not remember anything that happened after I was taken to an emergency room and got diagnosed. But I woke up the next day, and when I felt my tummy, it felt flatter than the previous night. That scared me to the core because I had thought I had lost my baby. When I woke up, my husband was the person I saw, which made me kind of angry because I almost died trying to call him, and he was not answering his phone. He came with a bouquet, as much as I wanted to be happy for his loving gesture, but I was too angry at him, and I wanted my child. My mind was all over, thinking about what had happened to my baby. Luckily, my aunt came in and I asked her where my baby was. I knew I would have asked Jace, but I didn't even want to look at him at that moment. My aunt told me that my baby was in the neonatal intensive care unit since he was born premature. As my mind was trying to adapt to what my aunt had told me, the doctor came in and told me that my baby's condition was critical at that moment. They had put him on NICU to support his lungs and heart since they were not fully developed, but the child was alive. Those words only made me happy. They made me feel like everything was okay, like I was full, and my world was full. My husband was also happy, well excited when he heard the doctor saying the baby was a he, since we didn't check the gender of the baby. We had wanted it to be a surprise, and he did become a surprise, a very good one at that. I thank God for saving my baby. Even today when I look at him, I see a fighter, my miracle. He became the best thing that had ever happened to me. 2 months later, my baby was out of the NICU, and it was the happiest moment of my life. You know, having to hold your baby in your arms for the first time because the doctor didn't want us to hold him since he had machines supporting his lungs. My husband was over the moon. He couldn't get his eyes off our child, and I had long forgiven him. I mean, despite the fact that I almost died and almost lost my child, but I had to thank the Lord and Savior for saving both my child and I. That was enough blessings to be grateful for. Since then, I knew that my life was changing for the better. About a year and a half later, Jace had changed again. He was no longer giving me his time and attention anymore. He was back at it again. The thought of him cheating on me and finding someone better than me came across my mind, but I would put the thoughts away and console myself by convincing my heart that Jace loved me enough and a lot for him to just cheat on me. I thought he was going to change, you know. I had faith in our relationship and marriage. Things got worse over time. My husband was unstoppable. It was like he had become a new person, you know. But I stayed with the fact that my husband loved me, so the thoughts of him doing something that would somehow ruin our family and our marriage, I would push them at the back of my head. We had found a baby minder because I had also gone back to work, even though Jace wanted me to quit my job and be a housewife, but I couldn't. I loved my job, and it became a very good distraction to not think about what had been going on in our home. What broke me the most was when my child would ask when his daddy would come home, and when we called him, he would sometimes cut off his call when baby Aya was still speaking to him. The child was used to spending most of the time with his father more than me, so if the father changes, what will I tell the child? And how did he think the child would feel? You know, the more my baby would ask for his father, either to video call with him or ask when he was coming back. I would sometimes get angry, not because of the fact that the child was asking for his father, but the fact that Jace had made the child too fond and got clingy with him. And when he was not there, I was the one suffering with Aya's questions and cries. When I got home from work, Jace was, I don't know, a mix of stress and anger. I don't know how I would put it, but he was in between the two. The minute I got inside the house, he threw his phone at me. I got so confused about why he would throw his phone on me. I'm sure every girl knows that if your man throws their phone on you, it always means nothing but trouble, so I knew there and then that I was indeed in trouble. He asked me why I had embarrassed him like the way I did. I didn't know what to say, so to get a clear picture of what he was referring to when he said I had embarrassed him, I opened his phone, and to my surprise, the phone had a video of me dancing like a hooker in the club. Mind you, I had long forgotten about what had happened to the party that happened like a year, close to 2 years ago. While I was still shocked at the video, I went to the comment sections and guessed what I saw. My pictures walking while holding hands with Edward. Another picture was a picture of baby Aya mixed with Edward's. I don't know how come I didn't see what I saw in the early days, you know. I was just happy that my husband was back, so I was just swimming in that happy bubble. I even forgot that I had skeletons in my closet. My baby looked so much like Edward, which made Jace aware that baby Aya didn't have any resemblance to him. After everything was out in the open, Jace couldn't even look at me. The only thing he said before he went AWOL was that I would reap what I saw and that I would regret even the day that I got involved with him. I knew that what he was saying wasn't from being hurt or disappointed, but it was actually a threat. I didn't know what to say to rectify my wrong and make Jace understand why I found myself involved with another man. He didn't even give me a chance to say something, you know. The only thing he did when he looked at the picture of Edwards and baby Aya, he looked livid to see that I saw my life flashing right in front of my eyes. Jace held me against the wall while choking me. I tried apologizing, but it all fell in deaf ears. He released me when he saw that I was giving up. He then stormed out, and since that day I had not even made any contacts with him. A few days later, I received a call from an unknown number, an office number. I first hesitated to answer it, but eventually I did. I had thought that maybe it was work or it might be Jace, but it was the hospital calling to inform me that Edward had been admitted to the hospital. He was brutally attacked, and I was the first person he called for when he woke up. I didn't understand why Edward would do that, so I was asked to come over to the hospital. As I was about to go out to see Edward, Jace got in just as I was getting in the car. That moment, I even forgot about Edward. I focused on mending things with my husband. 3 months passed. Edward was still in hospital, and Jace didn't want me to go anywhere near the hospital. I was feeling bad, because all of this was my fault. I was the one who went outside my marriage and availed myself as a single woman while I knew that I was married. I acted like a hooligan and jeopardized my marriage. I even got involved with another man, while my husband was too busy for me. Now that man who gave me his time and attention was suffering from the wrath of my actions. I was the one who was supposed to be punished. I needed to know if Edward was doing well. I felt guilty for everything that I did. Jace served me with divorce paper, but that was not before he had made me lose my job. I got fired. I was accused of fraud and corruption at work, which I didn't know how I got involved in. On another note, my baby was taken by social services. They had stated that I was not fit to mother a toddler because of the video that traveled on the internet. Jace really ruined me in my life. I am worried about Edward's condition. On the other hand, I needed to find a way to get my baby back. I couldn't believe that the person that I had shared most of my life with, a person who used to say that he loved me, would actually do this to me. I don't know what to do. I need help. I need to see Edward, what I should do. When I have a person who's looking at me wherever he is and tracking all my movements, I can't continue to live like this. Please give me your opinions on this.